Hey guys, tonight we slip into the golden sandals of an ancient god king. You are the Pharaoh of Egypt, beloved of the gods, feared by your enemies, and technically divine. Sounds like a sweet gig, right? Lavish palaces, loyal subjects, pyramids with your face carved on them. But before you get too comfortable, know this. The crown is heavier than it looks, and the royal life? Not quite a spa day. In fact, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this bedtime caravan travels. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up before the sun does, because Ra, the sun god, is counting on you. Not metaphorically, literally. Your high priests say you're the earthly embodiment of Horus and the living connection to divine forces. So if you oversleep, the sun might not rise. No pressure. The first thing you hear is chanting, rhythmic, nasal, very insistent. Then come the footsteps, bare feet on cold polished stone, and the tug of linen curtains around your bed. You crack one eye open, and already two attendants are bowing so low they might dislocate something. One of them smells like temple incense. The other is holding a golden basin. It's 4 a.m., and your job as a god has already started. Your neck aches from the ceremonial collar they didn't let you take off last night. The thing is heavy, rigid, and studded with lapis lazuli. You're expected to wear it to sleep to maintain the aura of divinity, even though it cuts off circulation if you lean the wrong way. Your back hurts from the cedar wood mattress, and your head pounds from the thick frankincense that's been burning since dusk. But the moment you sit up, a chorus of priests chants your throne name, loudly, with rattles. Today is the festival of Opet. Or maybe it's the Feast of the Valley. Honestly, it's hard to keep track. There are over 200 religious festivals on the calendar, and for each one, your body is basically a walking shrine, and there are no off days when you're a living god. A high priest enters, adjusting his leopard skin sash with solemnity. He bows so low his forehead brushes the floor. "Great one," he whispers, "your divine essence stirs the lotus of the world." That's code for hurry up and get dressed, you're already behind schedule. Your eunuch attendants start unwrapping your sleep linens, while another one shuffles in carrying your schedule etched onto a long strip of bark. There's already a red smear where someone's updated your temple appearance time. Classic. They lift you out of bed like a sacred relic. Two servants begin brushing your feet with goose feathers, supposedly to awaken your spirit gently. One of them sneezes. That's bad. Very bad. Sneezing during the feather awakening can mean misfortune. You glance sideways, and yes, someone's already calling for the royal magician. He'll probably have to chant an anti-sneeze spell and maybe sacrifice a duck, just to be safe. The sun has barely blinked over the horizon, and already your divine status is at risk because someone had hay fever. You're led barefoot across smooth, cool tiles to the washing chamber. The basin is filled with Nile water, carried from pure channels upstream, and stored overnight in sacred alabaster jars. That's the theory. In practice, it's still full of God knows what, fish bits, maybe frog eggs, but you're not allowed to complain. This water has been ritually blessed by 7 priests who stayed up all night chanting over it. And now it's being poured over your shoulders like a divine smoothie. It's cold, extremely cold. You bite your lip. The oiling comes next. This is where they rub a blend of unguents into your skin: olive oil, myrrh, cinnamon resin, and something that smells suspiciously like roasted garlic. One of them proudly announces it's a new blend with essence of lion sweat. You nod solemnly, even though that sounds more like a medieval wrestling gimmick. Your arms are held out like a scarecrow as they layer on the oils, then brush you with fine dust to absorb it. It's like being sanded down and polished like furniture. Your skin stings a little, but you can't wince. Divine beings don't wince. Then comes the royal breath inspection. A toothless priest leans forward with the ceremonial feather wand and waves it slowly beneath your nose. He sniffs, sniffs again. He mutters. Then he pulls out a paste of crushed mint and powdered bark and smears it along your gums like you're a toddler getting their first taste of toothpaste. You're not allowed to speak until this part is over. Historians still argue whether these morning rituals were more for religious reverence or palace control. But either way, your day can't start until 10 people have poked you, blessed you, and oiled your armpits. The royal wardrobe arrives next. Linen tunics so sheer they're practically non-existent, stiff gold belts, a crown so heavy it feels like a bowling ball on your head, and the ceremonial crook and flail. They're symbolic tools, representing kingship and power, but mostly they just make it hard to walk without whacking yourself in the knee. A scribe reads today's omens from last night's star chart. Turns out Mercury is in a bad position. Your political meetings might go sideways. You're advised to avoid making big decisions or eating figs. You make a mental note to cancel the fig platter, just in case. As your sandals are tied by trembling hands and the fan bearers line up beside you, you take one last breath before stepping through the golden doors to face your people, your priests, and a very long day of being too holy to scratch your own nose. You emerge into the marble-clad hallway like a divine statue come to life, flanked by fan bearers whose entire job is to keep you cool and mosquito-free. Their long palm leaf fans whisper through the still morning air. But it's not the heat that gets to you, it's the silence. Everyone drops to their knees the moment they see you. Even the stone-eyed guards lower their gaze. You're not allowed to make eye contact unless it's preordained in the royal protocol, which today it isn't. You walk in silence, your bare feet slapping softly against polished stone. The soles of your sandals have tiny gold pegs embedded to elevate you slightly from the ground, because touching the earth directly might disrupt your divine essence. It also makes every step feel like you're walking on old Legos. Dignity hurts. Your destination this morning is the Temple of Amun, a massive sandstone complex that smells of myrrh, sweat, and wet plaster. The temple priests have been prepping for days. Incense smoke curls lazily from bronze censers. Long-limbed dancers twirl in slow motion to the rhythm of drums, their shaved heads glistening under the desert sun. You're not here to pray. You're here to be prayed to. They march you straight to the inner sanctuary, a shadowed chamber where no mortal except the high priest is permitted to enter, except, of course, you. You step over a threshold scattered with lotus petals and walk toward the golden statue of Amun. His eyes, made of polished obsidian, seem to follow you. Or maybe that's just the low lighting and lack of sleep. You raise your arms and offer the prescribed chants. Your voice cracks a little. It's early, and you haven't had your honeyed beer yet, but no one reacts, at least not visibly. They all bow lower. One priest mumbles something about a voice like thunder. You try not to snort. Now comes the uncomfortable part, the oracle consultation. A pair of priests carry in a sacred bark, a kind of miniature golden boat on poles. It's said to house a moon spirit, and its movements are interpreted by four men straining under its weight. They ask the god questions, then rock the boat. If it bobs forward, that's a yes. Sideways? No. Drops a corner? That's a deeply mysterious maybe. Today, they ask if the Nile will flood properly this season. The bark wiggles, then tilts backward. Everyone gasps. That's usually not a good sign. One priest faints. Another starts reciting a protective hymn so fast he forgets to breathe. You raise an eyebrow. It's symbolic, they whisper. The god is reminding us to be humble. Historians still argue whether the bark movements were subtle priestly manipulations or sincere divine belief. You just know the last time it tilted backward, the granaries overflowed. So maybe the gods are just dramatic like that. Back outside, you mount the alabaster dais and wave at your subjects. Thousands have gathered in the courtyard, packed in so tightly that some are sitting on each other's shoulders. The nobles up front wear powdered wigs and robes stiff with starch. One of them sneezes into his sleeve. Uh-oh. 2 sneezes in 2 days? You glance nervously at your magician again. Your chief scribe sidles up and whispers the next duty into your ear. Receive tribute from the Nubian emissaries. You sigh. Gently, regally, like a divine being might when extremely overbooked, and nod. The Nubians arrive in a swirl of bright cloth and shiny jewelry. They bow low and present you with gifts: leopard skins, gold dust, incense, and wait, is that a live baboon? Yep, definitely a baboon. He's tied to a pole and glaring at you like he knows you personally offended him in a past life. You accept the offerings with practiced poise, while silently hoping they keep the baboon far away from the royal bedroom. Last time one got loose in the palace, it took 3 guards, a priest, and a net to catch it. Your cat still hasn't recovered. As the emissaries bow their way out, you retreat to the shade of the colonnade. A silver cup of sweet beer is finally handed to you. It's thick, lukewarm, and flecked with barley grains. But after the morning you've had, it might as well be ambrosia. Just as you start sipping, a courtier rushes forward with scrolls. More petitions, more problems. Some farmer in the Delta claims his neighbor's goats trespassed on a sacred grove. A stonemason is demanding more beer rations. Someone else has accused a rival of using a curse. Again. You rub your temples. Curses are technically illegal, but everybody uses them. There's an entire black market scroll trade for love hexes, fertility charms, and make your neighbor's teeth fall out incantations. You're supposed to pretend it's not happening, unless someone complains loudly enough, which this guy is. You glance at the petition, and make a royal mark, something halfway between a doodle and a divine decree. It basically says, handle this before it becomes my problem again. The scribe bows and disappears. No sooner have you leaned back than another official approaches. This one's in full panic mode. A sacred ibis has gone missing from the temple aviary. That's bad. Ibis birds are linked to Thoth, the god of wisdom, and when they vanish, people assume the gods are offended. You're expected to replace it immediately, preferably with one that looks wise, whatever that means. You whisper a tired, "Find one that doesn't bite," and motion for more beer. By midday, the crowd has melted into the heat haze, and your palace attendants usher you back inside for your ceremonial lunch. Bread, figs, honey-glazed fish, and a mysterious purple sauce you don't remember approving. You take a bite and raise an eyebrow. It's pomegranate and something divine, the servant offers with a nervous smile. You nod, chew slowly, and make a mental note to avoid purple sauces going forward. Your cat jumps onto the table. Everyone freezes. It's not just a cat, it's your cat, and therefore a sacred creature. It sniffs your bread, steals a bite, and leaps off. One priest whispers that Bastet has spoken. You wonder if Bastet could speak less during meals. You barely have time to digest before you're rushed to your afternoon appointment. Blessing the irrigation canals, more water, more chants, more sandals stabbing your feet. As you lift the ritual cup and pour sacred water into the earth, you wonder, briefly, if any other god spends this much time being exhausted, oiled, and sneezed on before lunch. The midday sun leans hard against the palace walls as you shuffle from the canal. Ceremony, back through a side corridor of the temple complex, trying to walk with divinely elegant posture despite a blister the size of a scarab forming on your heel. A priest insists on rubbing your feet with myrrh oil, which sounds luxurious until you realize he's not particularly gentle. You grimace. He mistakes it for a sign of enlightenment. You let him. You're ushered next into the Hall of Records, where your scribes await like a swarm of hieroglyph-obsessed bees. Dozens of reed pens scratch furiously across papyrus scrolls, tracking everything from crop yields to sandal inventories. You're here to approve tax quotas. Again. Every year the numbers look suspiciously inflated, but calling anyone out risks throwing the priesthood into a passive-aggressive spiral that lasts until the next flood season. Your vizier points to a map covered in little animal fat candles and clay tokens. This region underreported barley by 16 bushels, he whispers. Should we send an inspector? You squint at the map. That region is mostly sand and goats. Send a polite warning, you say, then add under your breath, and maybe a mildly threatening statue. Statues are your secret weapon. Nothing gets provincial governors moving faster than a life-sized limestone effigy of you glaring down at them from their front courtyard. Some even start offering it small food portions, just in case. Historians still argue whether this was due to genuine piety or fear of supernatural surveillance. Either way, it works. As you lean forward to sign another scroll, a scribe accidentally knocks over an ink jar. It splashes across the document and onto your sleeve. Everyone freezes. For a half second, the room goes dead quiet. Then the scribe falls flat on his face, wailing and begging for forgiveness. I am unworthy. Strike me down. Turn me into a dung beetle. You stare at the inky stain. It kind of looks like a falcon. Maybe Horace approves. You wave a hand. Just don't let it happen again. The scribe sobs with gratitude. Someone gives him a date cake. He thanks you a dozen times before crawling out of the room like he's just been resurrected. The next scroll is more serious. Another tomb robbery. That makes 4 this month. These are royal tombs, supposedly sealed forever beneath curses, booby traps, and terrifying murals of underworld demons. But apparently, none of that stops desperate gravediggers with a chisel and a strong sense of optimism. You clench your jaw. It's not just the gold that gets stolen. It's the spiritual desecration. Each item, each amulet, is meticulously chosen to help the dead navigate the afterlife. Strip that away, and you're leaving your ancestors blindfolded in the realm of eternal crocodiles. You issue a decree for harsher punishments and make a note to personally inspect the tomb security again. Honestly, it's enough to make you want to build your own pyramid on an island somewhere and install a moat full of hippos. Oh, right, your pyramid. The next appointment is with the royal architects. They arrive with rolls of blueprints, chunks of limestone, and extremely optimistic expressions. Your pyramid isn't finished yet, which is awkward, considering you're technically divine and supposedly immortal. But you know better. Pharaohs don't get retirement plans. They just slowly rot in gold-encrusted sarcophagi. One architect proudly presents a scale model with hidden shafts, false chambers, and a ventilation system fit for the gods. You peer inside. It does look fancy, maybe even cozy. But then he suggests a decorative mural of you hunting lions on the side. It'll inspire awe, he says. You raise an eyebrow. I've never hunted a lion. He leans in conspiratorially. You don't have to have done it. People just need to believe you did. This is how half your life ends up, as mythical propaganda. You nod slowly. Fine, but make the lion look scared. The architects exit, and you're finally granted a moment of solitude. Well, almost. A servant tiptoes in with a plate of honey-dipped locusts. You stare at them. The servant smiles nervously. A delicacy from the Eastern Delta, he offers. You sigh, pick one up, and crunch. It's crispy. Not bad, actually. You make a mental note. Never admit that publicly. Just as you're about to recline, your royal astronomer bursts in, wild-eyed and clutching a star chart like it personally insulted him. He points at a cluster of dots. There's an omen, he breathes. The red star has moved 3 degrees south. You blink. Is that bad? He nods dramatically. Some say it heralds rebellion. Others say plague. Or worse, famine. You pause. Or maybe it means someone spilled wine on your map again. He frowns. Historians still argue whether this star even existed, he mutters. You hand him a fig. Let's prepare for all 3, just in case. Later, in the privacy of your chamber, you collapse onto the cool alabaster couch. The breeze carries in the scent of jasmine from the gardens. You finally remove your headdress. It weighs more than most small children and leaves a groove in your scalp. Your physician checks your pulse, your breath, your aura. He mutters about aligning your chaos and recommends more lotus root in your diet. You nod, mostly so he'll leave. He insists on applying a poultice to your temple for divine clarity. It smells like pickled garlic and disappointment. Outside, the sun begins to dip, casting long shadows over the courtyard. Another day has evaporated in rituals, petitions, and mysterious sauces. You think briefly about running away, changing your name, selling pottery in Thebes, living without golden sandals. But you remember the prophecy etched into your birth room. The gods chose you, and the gods don't take returns. Evening doesn't offer much peace when you're Pharaoh. You'd think ruling all of Egypt would grant you at least a quiet dinner and maybe a nice oil lamp lit bath. But no, because now it's time for your favorite part of the day, divine audience. The temple courtyard is already glowing with torchlight, and the priests have set up that ridiculously oversized gold boat they wheel out for special ceremonies. It's not even a real boat. It just looks like one, perched on a platform with two long poles for carrying it around like a sacred shopping cart. But inside sits the statue of Amun-Ra, glittering inlaid eyes glinting like he knows exactly how tired you are. The high priest steps forward, robes billowing dramatically like he's in a stage play. He hands you a cone of incense and bows so low his wig nearly topples off. You resist the urge to mutter, "Can we speed this up?" Instead, you place the incense before the god statue and recite the daily invocation, which, let's be honest, feels less divine and more like reading aloud the world's most poetic shopping list. And yet, every eye in the courtyard watches your every movement. You are not just a man. You are the intermediary, the chosen conduit between the heavens and the dusty, sunburned people below. A pharaoh doesn't get to mumble or yawn. You have to radiate glory, even when your stomach is growling. Once the offerings are placed, the priests begin to chant. You stand silently, knowing they'll be at it for another half hour. So, like any sleep-deprived royal, you drift off in your head. You remember your tutor as a child, an old scholar with one tooth and zero patience. He drilled into you the 5 sacred postures of royal conduct. You got them wrong every time. He once whacked your ankle with a reed for laughing during a lesson about afterlife punishment. "Do you want to spend eternity being devoured by Amit?" he'd screech. You did not. Snap back to the present. The priests are still chanting. A bug is climbing your leg. You don't flinch. Eventually, the ritual ends, and the golden boat is wheeled away with great care and not so great steering. It nearly crashes into a column. You pretend not to notice. A pharaoh must never giggle. You're escorted to the evening council in the war chamber, because nothing says relaxing bedtime like reviewing threats from Nubian rebels and grumbling generals. The war chamber smells like old bronze and fresh paranoia. Maps are unrolled, stones placed to mark enemy positions. Your generals argue in hushed tones. One of them insists that the southern provinces are preparing an ambush. Another blames bandits. A third just wants more horses. You rub your temples. What if, you say carefully, we tried talking? The silence is immediate. Your defense minister blinks. You mean like a meeting? Yes, you nod. A meeting. Diplomacy. He scribbles something down. Probably a secret code for His Divine Majesty has finally cracked. You suggest sending a small delegation with gifts, beads, spices, maybe a trained monkey if one's available. Historians still argue whether your reign was truly peaceful or just unusually good at buying time with shiny trinkets. Either way, if it avoids war and lets you sleep in, you'll take it. Your vizier hands you a carved ivory box. Inside, wrapped in linen, is a message from the Hittite king. It's a marriage proposal, the vizier says, eyebrows raised. Again? You sigh. That's the third one this year. Apparently, your face on those statues is working overtime. This one even includes a painted likeness of his daughter. You study it, side profile, heavy eyeliner, suspiciously perfect teeth. Tell him I'm flattered, but still recovering from the last diplomatic wedding. The vizier bows. Understood. I'll say the stars are unfavorable. Finally, at what must be near midnight, you return to your private chambers. The stone walls glow orange from oil lamps, and servants have drawn a bath in a copper tub filled with lotus petals and suspiciously enthusiastic bubbles. You sink into the warm water with a sigh that's somewhere between human and deity. Above you, carved on the ceiling, is a depiction of Nut, the sky goddess, arching protectively over the world. It's beautiful, even if her limbs are disturbingly long. You stare up at her and think, just for a moment, about what it would be like to be under the sky, not above it. To not have the weight of every grain of Nile mud resting on your shoulders. A servant timidly places a golden tray beside the tub. Grapes, dates, candied crocodile tail, still chewy, always weird. You pop a grape in your mouth and close your eyes. But then there's a knock. Of course there is. It's your chief astrologer again. He bows deeply. Forgive me, divine one, but there is urgent celestial news. You raise an eyebrow. The red star again? Worse, he whispers, handing you a star chart soaked with sweat and possibly tears. Venus has vanished. You stare at him. Vanished? He nods. Gone. Not even a flicker. He starts muttering something about the balance between Ma'at and chaos. Should we panic now? Or wait until morning? You ask dryly. I recommend lighting more incense, he says, and perhaps fasting. You take another grape. I'll think about it. As he leaves, muttering into his beard, you lean back in your tub and try to tune it all out. The stars, the scribes, the generals, the golden boat with its squeaky wheels. You're exhausted, but in ancient Egypt, even sleep is a ritual. Your bed is a raised wooden frame with lion's paw legs, softened with palm fiber cushions and linen sheets scented with cinnamon. Before you lie down, you must perform the prayer of the night wind. It's a poetic verse about protection and stillness, usually chanted while holding an amulet shaped like an eye, a beetle, or sometimes a disembodied foot. Don't ask. You choose the scarab. Safer. The final step before sleep? Dream interpretation. A priest is stationed by your bedside, ready to record whatever visions you might have and interpret them by morning. Try to dream of white lotus petals, he advises. Good omens. You nod. What about flying monkeys? He frowns. That means plague. Noted. You finally slip beneath the sheets, eyes fluttering closed. You are Pharaoh. You are never truly alone. The dream begins the way most pharaoh dreams do, half memory, half omen, with a sprinkle of chaos. You're floating down the Nile in a boat made of clouds, your oars shaped like lotus petals, and the sun god Ra winks at you from above. Then, without warning, the boat turns into a giant cobra, and suddenly you're soaring over sand dunes that whisper your name in voices that sound suspiciously like your court advisors. You wake with a jolt. It's still dark, but the palace is already stirring. Someone is playing a harp outside your chamber, a sleepy, wandering melody meant to gently tug you from dreams. Too bad your dream included a seven-eyed jackal eating your crown. That's probably a bad sign, you mutter. The dream priest is already at your bedside, tablet in hand, eyes wide with expectation. You spoke in your sleep, he says reverently. Something about bees. And cheese? You squint. That doesn't sound divine. He shrugs. Historians still argue whether dream bees symbolized fertility or famine, perhaps both. Breakfast is brought in while you recount your bizarre visions. A light meal. Flatbread, dates, figs, and a little salted goose. You chew slowly as the priest mutters interpretations. Bees mean renewal. The jackal, transformation. The cheese, he hesitates, possibly digestive turmoil. You nod solemnly. Truly, the gods are mysterious. After the priest finally scurries off to write a scroll about your prophetic cheese nightmare, you're reminded that today is not just any day. Today is the festival of the Sed, your royal jubilee. A rare and deeply symbolic event where the pharaoh must publicly prove he still has the physical strength and spiritual authority to rule. Basically, it's a state-sponsored obstacle course with fancy costumes. You get dressed in the ceremonial white tunic, flanked by leopard skin-clad priests and a swarm of attendants. They fit you with golden sandals and place the crook and flail in your hands, the traditional symbols of kingly power. You're then led outside to the said court, a sacred stone arena surrounded by statues of your ancestors, all watching you with judging eyes. No pressure. You begin the ritual run. Yes, run, in full ceremonial dress, around a rectangular track symbolizing the borders of Egypt. You're expected to complete 4 laps, 2 in the guise of ruling Upper Egypt, 2 as the Lord of Lower Egypt. It's symbolic, sure. But it's also physically brutal, especially in 90-degree heat and 30 pounds of linen and jewelry. Your thighs are already regretting this. Halfway through the first lap, you try to look regal. A nearby scribe whispers, "He's sweating divinely." You resist the urge to glare. On the second lap, your legs start to feel like cooked goose. A fan bearer rushes forward, flapping palm fronds as if your life depends on it. It might. You complete the third lap by sheer force of ego. You're not about to collapse in front of all Egypt. Finally, lap 4. You raise your crook triumphantly. The crowd cheers, the trumpets blare, and you wobble slightly on the final turn, narrowly avoiding a faceplant into sacred limestone. When it's over, you collapse, gracefully, you hope, onto a platform throne, gasping. The high priest sprinkles you with rose water, and the royal herald announces your continued divine legitimacy. You're too busy trying not to throw up to be flattered. The rest of the said festival is a whirlwind. There are feasts in your honor, dancers spinning in glittering linen, acrobats balancing on pottery, and even a trained baboon that claps whenever someone says your name. You have no idea who trained it, but you want to promote them. You're given offerings from nobles and dignitaries, jars of imported wine, leopard pelts, bundles of incense, and, your personal favorite, a miniature obelisk carved from lapis lazuli. It weighs about 20 pounds and has your face on it 3 times. Modesty was not a popular virtue in ancient Egypt. A comedic skit is performed in your honor. A jester dressed like a crocodile chases a mock priest around while yelling, "Return my sacred fish!" The crowd laughs. You snort. It's ridiculous. It's also probably the most fun you'll have this week. Later, you're presented with scrolls detailing the blessings of the gods. Osiris grants you eternal justice. Thoth offers wisdom. Hathor sends protection. And a song performed by her temple musicians using flutes and sistrums. It's melodic, haunting, and a little too upbeat for your sore muscles. And then, the capstone of the ceremony, the royal renewal. You're led into a hidden chamber beneath the temple, lit with flickering oil lamps and lined with carved depictions of the underworld journey. Here, you're stripped of your festival garb and wrapped, yes, wrapped in symbolic mummy bandages. It's meant to represent your symbolic death and rebirth. Honestly, it's itchy and slightly claustrophobic. You lie there as the priests chant over you, invoking the protection of Anubis and Isis. One brushes an ostrich feather across your forehead. Another sprinkles barley grains around you in a perfect circle. You are reborn, they declare. You sit up slowly, feeling slightly dizzy and very sweaty. Once reborn, you're given a cup of sacred beer. Foamy, sour, and flat. You sip it because you're expected to, but it tastes like something Eskira, scraped from the bottom of a papyrus basket. Back in the sunlit courtyard, the crowd erupts in applause as you appear in your new regalia. A tall blue crown and a sash embroidered with falcons. You wave, majestic and mildly dehydrated. The day ends with a sunset procession to the Nile, where you toss lotus petals into the river to mark your spiritual renewal. The petals drift downstream like tiny boats. One of them gets eaten by a fish. So much for symbolism. By the time you return to your palace, your legs are aching. Your crown is lopsided, and your ceremonial beard has started to itch. A servant carefully removes your sandals, while another rubs scented oil into your shoulders. You exhale a breath you've been holding all day. In the distance, someone begins playing the harp again. You lean back on a cushioned bench, staring at the ceiling. Just another average day in the disturbing, absurd, exhausting life of a living god. You dream you're a scarab beetle rolling the sun across the sky with your tiny, heroic legs. Then suddenly, the sun turns into a loaf of barley bread and collapses under its own weight, flattening you into the sand. You wake up gasping, clutching your bed linens like they owe you answers. Another royal morning. This time, you're greeted not with soft harp music, but with the scratch, scratch, scratch of a reed pen scribbling feverishly. The high scribe is already seated near your bed, balanced precariously on a little stool, surrounded by scrolls. He barely looks up. We must go over your divine correspondence. You groan and reach for your linen robe. It turns out being a living god comes with a lot of paperwork. The scribes bring you the latest dispatches. An inventory of temple grain reserves, down again. A request from the priesthood of Ptah for more gold leaf. They're out of shiny things. And a polite yet urgent letter from the Nubian vassal state complaining that your last shipment of sacred cats arrived. Shall we say, underwhelming in quantity and ferocity. And then there's the awkward matter of the Hittites. They want to marry into your family again. You skim the scroll. To seal our peace, may our houses be bound in sacred union, it says, which is diplomatic code for please marry your sister to our prince before someone throws a chariot at someone else. Historians still argue whether these marriage alliances were a sign of diplomacy, desperation, or just an ancient version of royal speed dating. Speaking of family, the royal household is bustling this morning. You hear your mother shouting at your younger brother down the hall. Something about misplacing an amulet. Your sister is practicing the harp badly. Somewhere, a cousin is loudly demanding more honey for their figs. Being Pharaoh means living in a palace full of relatives who act like they also rule the kingdom. Your great royal wife enters the room with the kind of calm, practiced elegance that comes from years of palace politics. She hands you a cool towel and asks if you slept well. I was crushed by a bread sun, you reply. She nods solemnly, a sign of abundance. The conversation shifts to your children, several of whom are now old enough to start their royal training. This means being sent off to temple schools where they'll learn sacred texts, military drills, and how to look serene while being worshipped. The lucky ones might even learn how to read. You're handed a list of potential tutors. Some are priests, some are war veterans. One is a man who claims to speak directly to Horus through his pet ibis. Put a maybe next to that one, you mumble. Meanwhile, the palace is preparing for the weekly audience of supplicants. This is when you sit on a golden throne for hours, while people come in to bow, complain, offer gifts, or ask if you can bless their cattle. You're allowed to speak only sparingly. Most of your responses are relayed through priests in elaborate riddles that sound profound but are mostly nonsense. You don your official headdress and head to the audience chamber. First up, a grain merchant from Memphis who claims his wagons were sabotaged by jealous rivals. He offers you a clay figurine shaped like a cow with rubies for eyes. It's cute. You nod gravely, and your high priest says, "The eye of Ra sees all injustice. Let balance return to your household." Translation: we'll look into it, maybe. Next, a peasant woman who's walked barefoot across half of Lower Egypt to present you with a bundle of herbs and a petition to save her son from conscription. You're moved, but you're also flanked by generals who are definitely not crying. You make the gesture for mercy. A priest announces, "The heart of the two lands beats with compassion. The child shall return to his mother's hut." The room exhales. Somewhere, a royal scribe scribbles down your mercy for the official annals. It'll be used to make you look wise during next year's said festival pamphlet. Midway through, you get a nosebleed. Someone rushes forward with a perfumed cloth. You wave them off. "Just dry air," you mutter, but the priests whisper among themselves about omens and celestial alignment. Even checks your horoscope by casting stones onto a bronze tray. "Mars is in retrograde," he says gravely. You resist the urge to sigh. You take a short break, by which we mean you're led to a shaded courtyard where musicians play soft flute music while you're offered melon slices and a small bowl of salted locusts. Crunchy, surprisingly decent. Definitely not vegan. A few moments of quiet. Then the royal architect arrives, scroll in hand. Your Majesty, we must discuss the pyramid. Ah, yes, your pyramid, because being a god king apparently isn't enough. You must also plan a monumental structure to house your mummified remains for eternity. No pressure. He shows you sketches. We've added a second false burial chamber to throw off tomb robbers. You nod. Will it work? He shrugs. Historians still argue whether any of them ever did. You discuss limestone angles, secret passageways, and the exact celestial alignment needed to ensure your soul launches properly into the afterlife. The architect suggests a small chapel beside the pyramid entrance for offerings. You suggest a secret room where your cats can nap. Priorities. Evening rolls in with the scent of blue lotus and burning myrrh. You're led to the roof of the palace to watch the sun set behind your future tomb, its tip barely visible on the horizon. The priests chant prayers to Autumn as your great royal wife joins you. You hold hands. It's one of those rare, quiet moments when you feel like maybe, just maybe, this whole divine monarch life thing isn't completely ridiculous. Then, someone drops a bronze bowl down a staircase and ruins the mood. You retire for the night, pausing to feed your favorite cat a morsel of roasted duck. You whisper to her, "You'd have made a better pharaoh." She yawns, regale and unimpressed. You settle into your bed, exhausted from decisions, rituals, and family drama. Just before you drift off, you wonder if the dream sun will squish you again. Probably. The room is dark, save for the soft flicker of oil lamps and the occasional glow of starlight filtering through a finely carved lattice. You're asleep, but not entirely. Not when you're Pharaoh. Even your dreams aren't safe from the burden of rulership. Tonight, they take a strange turn. You're floating down the Nile in a boat made entirely of obsidian, flanked by crocodiles wearing golden collars. The moon laughs at you. A baboon starts reciting your daily schedule. Sunrise, worship. Mid-morning, war. Lunch, figs and diplomatic threats. You jolt awake, and you're not alone. Standing at the foot of your bed is the chief dream interpreter, a solemn figure with eyes that never blink and a scroll that seems way too long for this hour. He bows slightly and says, "Your Majesty cried out in his sleep. Was the serpent again? No. This time it was baboons," you murmur, still groggy. He clicks his tongue. Even worse. You close your eyes and groan. It's time for the rituals. Before dawn, you're bathed again. This time in water, mixed with lotus petals, palm wine, and what smells suspiciously like goat sweat. The priests chant endlessly while pouring the water over your shoulders. One sneezes mid-chant, but pretends nothing happened. You pretend you didn't hear it. Let the gods sort that one out. Your coal is reapplied. Your nails are cleaned. Your feet are rubbed with oils to protect them from curses that could seep in through the toes, apparently. You're dressed not just in linen, but in ceremonial linen. There's a difference, and don't you dare question it. And now, it's time for divine communion. You're led through torchlit corridors to a hidden chamber inside the great temple of Amun. This is where the most secret rites occur. No scribes, no onlookers, just you, a few high priests, and an extremely old statue of the god with disturbingly lifelike eyes. The ritual is known as the awakening of the god. You approach the statue. The priests begin their whispered hymns. You touch the sacred relic, an ankh, warm from firelight, and you speak the invocations written generations before your birth. You've done this hundreds of times, and still, it feels like the god is staring right through your ribs. You place offerings of wine, incense, and cake at the statue's feet. Historians still argue whether pharaohs truly believed the statues held divine presence, or whether it was all a very elaborate political theater. But in this moment, with the air thick with incense and ancient power, you're not really in the mood to question it. Outside, the city is waking. The sun peeks over the eastern hills, gilding the palace rooftops with light. In the streets, bakers fire up their clay ovens, children chase goats, and merchants open their stalls. But up here, in your inner sanctum, the real morning begins with the festival of daily rebirth. You're dressed in gold-threaded robes, carried in a palanquin through the palace gardens, surrounded by chanting priests, flower bearers, and temple dancers. At the exact moment the sun rises above the horizon, you raise your hand toward the east and declare something dramatic like, "The light of Ra flows through me." There's always someone who faints. Maybe it's heat stroke. Maybe it's the sheer divine vibe you give off. You'll never know. You're guided to the royal garden for a midday interlude. Here's a little-known fact. Pharaohs were obsessed with plants. You walk among tamarisk trees, papyrus thickets, and imported myrrh shrubs guarded by men with fly whisks. The head gardener tells you how well the blue lilies are doing. You nod solemnly, pretending this is crucial information to the empire's survival. Your lunch is a pyramid of roasted pigeon, bread, lentils, and cucumbers arranged in the shape of a scarab. You bite into a honey cake shaped like a lotus blossom and nearly lose a tooth. Apparently, it was blessed with a bit too much symbolic density. The afternoon brings another surprise. Your astrologers arrive with fresh predictions. One unrolls a papyrus scroll covered in stars and tiny animals. A celestial conjunction approaches. The red one moves toward Osiris. You wait. What does that mean? He looks grim. You should avoid figs for 3 days and not make eye contact with left-handed soldiers. You thank him and make a mental note to cancel your fig shipment. Later, you oversee a royal inspection of the temple construction site. You're lifted onto a platform, shaded by ostrich feather fans, as workers haul giant limestone blocks across wooden sleds soaked with water. The overseer bows and informs you of progress. He uses phrases like divinely on schedule and the gods favor our project management. You smile, but in your head, you're just wondering how many more weeks you'll need to pretend you understand how scaffolding works. There's a commotion. One of the laborers has collapsed, a heat stroke maybe, or exhaustion. The priests say, "Offer a prayer and let Ma'at sort his soul." You nod, but you can't help the sinking feeling that being a god king is a very lonely way to rule. Evening again. You return to your quarters, where your cat is sleeping on a scroll about tax grain yields. You pet her softly, wondering if she too dreams of obsidian boats and baboon bureaucrats. There's a knock. Your youngest child peers in, holding a carved wooden hippo. "Father, Will the gods still love me if I spill pomegranate juice on the sacred linen? You chuckle. Only if you don't do it twice. They laugh and vanish down the hall. You smile. That one's going to make a fine future pharaoh or an excellent garden inspector. You lie back, watching the ceiling flicker with the lamplight's dance. Somewhere, a harp begins to play. The weight of the crown presses down, even when you're not wearing it. And tomorrow, you'll do it. All again. You wake to the rhythmic hum of a sistrum, the sacred rattle used to soothe the gods. Or in your case, to shake you out of your one good hour of sleep. Your attendants are already bustling about, flinging open carved shutters, letting in the morning heat like it's a blessing. It isn't. It's June, which means you're already sweating by the time your feet touch the floor. But there's no such thing as sleeping in when you're Pharaoh. The world doesn't spin unless you say so. Or at least, that's what everyone insists. Priests, generals, even the royal scribe with the unfortunate habit of reading back your own decrees to you with excessive dramatic flair. Today's focus, security. The darker side of kingship. Not the golden statues or anthems chanted in your name, but the daggers behind curtains, the poisoners, the disgruntled cousins with dynastic dreams. Being a living god doesn't mean you're safe from dying like a mortal. Before you've even finished your honeyed date porridge, the Royal Protection Office delivers a report. A suspicious scroll was found hidden beneath a granary floor. It names you, alongside a crudely drawn picture of a snake with your crown. Probably symbolic, the guards mumble. But we boiled it anyway, just to be sure. Your bodyguard detail has doubled since last week. They used to stand at a polite distance. Now, they're so close you can smell their garlic breath. One even walks backwards just to keep both eyes on you. You try not to trip over him. Historians still argue whether pharaohs faced more internal threats from palace intrigue or external threats from foreign armies. You're starting to suspect it's both. And some days, you'd rather deal with the armies. There's a meeting in the Great Hall. The generals have gathered with maps, reports, and at least one man who keeps loudly clearing his throat just to remind you he's got something to say. Your Divine Majesty, the commander begins, our spies have returned from Nubia. Of course they have. It's always Nubia, or Libya, or the Hittites. Someone somewhere always thinks the empire is vulnerable. You nod while the map is unrolled. It's huge, practically covers the floor, and labeled with places you only vaguely remember authorizing a conquest for. There's a new fort under construction, supply routes in question, and a river that's allegedly moved. Again, as you ponder these geopolitics, you're offered a drink of fermented barley water laced with honey. It's either a peace offering from the priests or someone's very lazy assassination attempt. You sip it cautiously. Tastes awful. Must be safe. During a short break, the vizier whispers about whispers. Rumors specifically of discontent among minor nobles. Something about an heir gaining too much popularity. You raise an eyebrow. Which heir? He hesitates. You have quite a few. Right. That's the problem with fathering the future of Egypt. You lose track after the first dozen. You stroll the palace gardens for clarity. Papyrus rustles gently. The sacred ibis wades in shallow pools, pretending to be innocent of divine omens. You spot two royal scribes arguing over an astrological calendar, smacking each other with palm fronds. One of them yells, "The eclipse doesn't mean doom, it means realignment." The other shouts, "Tell that to the collapsed granary." You keep walking. Let them sort it out. There's another audience this afternoon. You dread these the most. Nobles and dignitaries from the outer provinces, each with their own petitions, schemes, and suspiciously polished sandals. They kneel, grovel, and present tributes of ivory, leopard skins, and a surprisingly aggressive peacock that must have slipped through customs. A wealthy grain lord offers a statue carved from lapis lazuli. "To honor your eternal rule," he says, with a smile too wide to trust. You accept it with the expression of someone who has received 47 identical statues in the past year. Later, one of your most trusted handmaidens, more spy than servant, brings news of a secret meeting among your own cousins. You sigh, again with the cousins. "Let them meet," you murmur. "Just make sure they meet where the guards can hear them." You retreat to the archive chambers. The scent of parchment and beeswax fills the air. Here, surrounded by millennia of dynastic memory, you feel a sliver of peace. You unroll an ancient scroll written by a pharaoh long dead, one who also complained about rebellious nephews and scheming priests. He wrote, "May the gods grant me patience, or at least silence from the high priest of Sobek." You chuckle. Same problems, different millennium. Suddenly, the chief embalmer enters. Now this is unexpected. Embalmers usually only appear when something, or someone, is very wrong. He bows low and says, "A precaution, Majesty. We've uncovered a plot involving, let's say, dangerous objects hidden in ceremonial items." You blink. "You mean like cursed amulets?" He nods gravely. "Or poisoned scepters?" It's happened before. He offers to examine your regalia for, and these are his exact words, premature funerary significance. You reluctantly agree. He scurries off with your favorite sun disk crown muttering about potential malevolence in the inlays. Fringe fact of the day: some pharaohs kept decoy tombs, not to confuse grave robbers, but to confuse their enemies about where they might flee if their palace were stormed. You consider commissioning one, just in case. As the sky shifts from golden to lavender, you dine in the private hall, flanked by guards so tense they're practically furniture. You watch shadows creep along the sandstone walls and wonder how many people in this very building would seize your crown the moment it hit the floor. But it doesn't. You're still here, still standing, still wearing the burden of being half god, half target. You curl up under the canopy of your bed, ceiling painted with stars, and try to sleep while one eye remains metaphorically, maybe literally, open. Tomorrow, you'll worship the gods again. And maybe, if you're lucky, they'll worship you back. Dawn is barely a suggestion on the horizon when you're stirred by the soft whisper of linen brushing against the stone floor. One of your hand servants, clearly trained in the art of not startling a god king, places a tray near your bed with dates, bread, and something that might be figs, or very confident beetles. Either way, you're expected to eat. Before you even sit up, You're reminded that today is festival day. Not just any festival, of course. The said festival, your royal jubilee, the celebration of your reign, your divine vitality, and your ability to jog a short distance in public without collapsing. It's a day of ceremony, sacred theater, and very polite pretending. You glance down at yourself and sigh. Time to get into costume, which is to say, time to become the god everyone expects. The said festival is no small affair. It's arguably one of the oldest royal ceremonies in the world, and you're smack in the middle of it. This thing makes modern political campaigns look like quiet brunches. Everyone shows up. Priests, nobles, soldiers, acrobats, sacred cows. Yes, literal sacred cows. And a disturbingly large number of dancers who always seem way too happy to be at 4 o'clock a.m. rehearsals. Historians still argue whether the Esed festival was primarily a public ritual of rejuvenation or a subtle test to ensure the pharaoh wasn't slipping into political senility. You, personally, suspect it's both. A sacred CrossFit test disguised as worship. Today, your divine performance begins in the Temple of Ptah. You're draped in a ceremonial kilt with about 12 layers of gold, all of which seem specifically designed to catch the heat of the sun and reflect it directly into your face. The collar of your robe alone weighs more than your youngest son. As drums pound and incense smokes into the heavens, you emerge before the crowd. Thousands of eyes fall upon you. Some reverent, some skeptical, some probably just wondering how you're not drowning in your own sweat. You raise your arms. Cheers erupt. The high priest of Amun begins the chant. He who lives eternally, the falcon of gold, the king of the two lands. You try to smile like you haven't been standing in sandals made entirely of woven reeds and misplaced optimism. Then comes the run. The said run is one of the strangest parts of the entire day. You jog from one end of the ritual court to the other, marking your continued strength to rule. The course is symbolic, bounding from one border of the empire to the next. You're flanked by guards, musicians, and a fan bearer who seems more out of breath than you are. But you do it, twice, just to show them. Fringe fact time. Some pharaohs faked parts of their seed festival. Delegates did the running. Hidden wires, lifted statues, and divine signs were conveniently timed. You don't fake it, though you are heavily encouraged to walk slowly when returning. After the ritual sprint, you're seated on the Jubilee throne. A massive gaudy chair covered in turquoise tiles and depictions of you smiting various enemies, most of whom look like they were drawn from memory by a sleep-deprived artisan. Tributes arrive from all corners of the empire. Giant jars of wine, crocodile skulls, obsidian blades, a really long poem from a scribe who insists on reading it aloud while standing way too close to your face. The children of nobles perform a sacred dance that's mostly jumping and twirling. You try to look delighted. One of them accidentally kicks over a ceremonial lotus arrangement you pretend not to notice. As the sun climbs higher, so do the demands. The priests of Thoth want a special blessing. The priests of Bastet want to parade cats through the temple. The high priest of Ra insists you take part in a sun ritual, where you raise a golden staff exactly 47 times in honor of each year of your reign. You raise it 45 times and fake the last two with an overly dramatic exhale. No one calls you out. You break briefly to eat, if you can call it that. Festival food is sacred, but it's also suspicious. Pickled lotus petals, dried locusts dipped in honey, and something labeled divine cheese, which smells like divine punishment. You stick with dates and beer, always safe bets. In the afternoon, the dramatics shift indoors. The royal scribes read a recounting of your greatest victories, which sounds suspiciously more heroic than you remember. You apparently defeated 50 rebels with a single glare and convinced a wild hippo to surrender without violence. The crowd nods, impressed. You nod too, trying not to laugh. Then, there's a reenactment of your coronation, a symbolic second crowning that renews your authority. You step up to the platform, arms raised, as the twin crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt are set once again upon your head. Everyone cheers. Even the peacock from last week seems impressed. But beneath the spectacle, you can feel it, that undercurrent of pressure. This isn't just a party. It's a public test. They want to see if their God still walks, still speaks, still commands. And you do, but just barely. As the day winds down, you're guided to the sacred lake. Here, a private ritual takes place, the washing of the king. Priests pour holy water over your arms, your face, your feet. They chant prayers so old and even they don't know what half the words mean. You stare at your reflection in the dark water. For a moment, it blurs. Your face replaced by the many masks you've worn: warrior, builder, divine judge, father of the nation. It's dizzying. And then the high priest whispers, "It is done, Pharaoh. You live again." You smile faintly. You never stopped. As torches light the palace once more, and the distant beat of drums fades into the night, you walk back to your chamber, slowly, tired to your bones, but style draped in gold. Your sandals thud against the cool tiles, and you wonder what tomorrow's godhood will demand. The next morning, your bones still ache from the ceremonial sprint, your shoulders from the 12 pounds of gilded lion head medallions, and your ears from the longest flute solo in the history of religious theater. But there's no time for recovery. Today is all about diplomacy. And by diplomacy, we mean smiling stiffly while people from other kingdoms try to outgift each other using gold, giraffes, and extremely confusing tribute rituals. You shuffle into the audience chamber. Your throne, again, waits at the far end, this time under a canopy embroidered with lapis and stars. The floor is polished limestone, and the air smells like a floral arrangement had a fist fight with a spice merchant, and they both lost. The Nubian emissary is already here. He bows deeply, offering frankincense, leopard hides, and a bowl of what looks suspiciously like caramelized termites. You accept them with practiced grace, knowing that what matters isn't the bowl, it's the bow. The envoys from the Levant follow. They bring cedar wood, lapis, and tiny glass bottles filled with something they call sky water. You suspect it's perfume, or a cleverly disguised insult. You smile either way. Behind them, the Mitanni arrive with dancing girls, live monkeys, and a metal sculpture of a hawk with rubies for eyes. One of the monkeys pees on the carpet. The high priest glares. You pretend it didn't happen. Diplomacy in ancient Egypt isn't just about war and peace. It's theater, full of unspoken tests of dominance. Who bows lower? Who offers the more exotic animal? Who tries to name drop their own gods first in the speech? Historians still argue whether these exchanges were purely ceremonial or subtly competitive, ritualized one-upmanship in silk robes. The truth probably lies somewhere between sacred exchange and ancient episode of The Bachelor, Pharaoh edition. As each group bows out, scribes record every detail, the tribute value, the posture, even how loudly each delegate praises your eternal wisdom. It's all carefully noted, in case someone needs to be gently reminded next time. Once the crowd disperses, you're ushered into a smaller, more private meeting. This one with the royal architects. They bring scrolls covered in impossible geometry, blueprints for your next big legacy project, a new temple complex, massive obelisks, perhaps even an artificial lake shaped like a lotus, just because. You nod sagely, pointing at one plan in particular. It has a garden, a sacred pool, and a colonnade wide enough for an entire elephant procession. It's all wildly ambitious. You love it. The lead architect bows, visibly sweating. Not because of the temperature, because if the project fails, you might decide his afterlife should start a bit early. As you leave the meeting, you glance over at the obelisk being carved in the quarry beyond the palace walls. It's over 100 feet long, a single piece of rose granite. Dozens of men are chiseling it slowly, carefully, as if they're afraid the rock might talk back. Fringe fact: some ancient obelisks cracked during carving and were left abandoned, like forgotten gods half born from the stone. Back inside, the midday heat has thickened. You're guided to your personal shrine for a brief offering to your divine namesake, Ra, Horus, Amun, or, depending on the day, all three at once. Today it's Horus. You press incense into a bronze burner and whisper a prayer. Your voice is quiet, but the symbolism is deafening. A god praying to a god. Welcome to Pharaoh life. A soft breeze moves through the papyrus screens, and you pause for a moment. Just a moment. Long enough to wonder if any of this, the gifts, the gold, the gods, is for you. Or if you're just playing your part until the curtains close. Then in walks your eldest son. He's 14, tall for his age, eyes sharp. Today, he's wearing a smaller version of your own ceremonial robes, and he's carrying a wooden scepter for practice. The high priest has begun training him, just in case. You look at him and remember your own childhood, terrified in the same corridors, reciting rituals backwards, sneaking scraps of honeyed bread when the guards weren't looking. He sits beside you, tries to mirror your posture, fails, adjusts again. "Father," he says, "when will I be ready?" You raise an eyebrow. When you can listen to 10 nobles talk about grain taxes without falling asleep. He laughs, a bright sound that echoes off the limestone. You smile despite yourself. There's a moment, a rare one, where you're not Pharaoh or God King or divine mediator. You're just a tired father teaching his son how to walk, like eternity is watching. And eternity is. Evening comes, and you're back in the gardens. The same gardens where lotus blooms open with slow grace and ibises wade through shallow pools, A crocodile sunbathes on the far bank, probably the same one from last week. You've named him Diplomat. The festival's almost over. Just one final ritual remains, the renewal flame. You walk barefoot down a corridor of torches. The palace is quiet now, too quiet, almost reverent. At the far end, in a shallow pit of sandstone, a flame flickers atop sacred oil. You kneel and whisper the ancient words, words older than any crown or monument. The flame dances, it lives, which means, for tonight, so do you. And then, as always, the mask goes back on, because the people still need their God. The moment you rise from the sacred flame, the weight of the crown feels heavier again, figuratively and literally. You swear it's grown overnight, or maybe your neck is finally staging a quiet rebellion. You return to your private quarters, but of course, privacy is a myth. Attendants flutter around you like nervous birds, adjusting your collar, massaging scented oil into your shoulders, trimming exactly one fingernail to meet a prophetic dream a priest had last week. Supposedly, the gods are particular about grooming, but before you can rest, another audience. This time, it's not ambassadors or priests. It's your own family. Now, family life in a royal palace, a political minefield disguised as a tea party. Your mother enters first, still regal, still wearing eyeliner sharper than your sword. She bows only a little. She's the one who taught you how to kneel with pride and strike with a smile. Her presence is a gentle reminder. No one ever really retires from ruling. They just whisper from the background. Then come your wives. Yes, plural. That's not just a fun rumor. It's your reality. Your great royal wife, the politically perfect match, sits to your right. She's composed, intelligent, and can recite the Nile's flood patterns from memory. To your left, one of your lesser wives, who may or may not be your half-sister. Historians still argue whether sibling marriages were strategic alliances or just, well, ancient Egypt being ancient Egypt. And then there are the children. 2, 5, maybe more depending on whose count you trust today. One is gnawing on a pomegranate. Another is trying to steal the crown from your head as a joke. You let them, sort of. It's one of the few moments where laughter feels unscripted. Dinner is served on low ivory tables. Roast duck, dates, lentils, fish baked in clay. You're not particularly hungry, but eating with your family is part of the performance. You take slow bites. Occasionally, someone mentions a dream they had, and immediately the room turns to the high priest at the corner of the table for interpretation. Last night, your youngest daughter dreamed of a lion swallowing the moon. He strokes his chin and declares it a sign of political unrest in the western oases. You nod sagely, though internally, you wonder if she just saw a lion, or the moon, or both. Fringe fact: ancient Egyptian royals put serious stock in dreams. Entire decisions, wars, marriages, temple constructions, were sometimes based on a half-remembered sleep vision scribbled onto a piece of linen by dawn. After dinner, your scribe brings news from the workers' village near your latest temple. There's been a minor revolt over bread rations. The workers want more wheat and, in a twist, a new shade of blue paint for the murals. You issue a decree: raise the rations, approve the blue. Crisis averted, for now. You take a deep breath. This is the real game of being Pharaoh. The small cracks in the stonework. A temple doesn't crumble from above. It gives way from the workers in its foundations. Back in your inner sanctum, incense curls in lazy spirals from brass bowls. You sit cross-legged before a wall-sized carving of the gods. They stare down with blank, eternal eyes. You stare back, blinking. There's something strange in the air tonight, something restless. Outside, the stars begin to rise. One in particular gleams brighter, Sirius, the harbinger of the Nile flood. Its first appearance every year marks the beginning of everything. Renewal, rebirth, and, unfortunately, tax season. The astrologer joins you, adjusting his robe as he lowers himself to the floor. He draws lines in a pan of sand with a carved stick, muttering celestial math under his breath. You can't quite follow, but the gist is clear. Big changes are coming. Perhaps a new god, he whispers, or a new name for an old one. You sigh. You've just finished building 100 statues of Amun, and now you might need to rename the main temple to Aten. Again, historians still debate whether pharaohs initiated these shifts for theology or political control. You suspect both, and also boredom. You lie back on the polished stone bench that doubles as your bed. It's surprisingly comfortable once you get used to the chill. The linen sheets smell faintly of lotus and smoke. A servant sets a small golden dish beside you, your nightly potion, a mix of honey, figs, opium, and maybe a little prayer. Tea doesn't knock you out, but it helps blur the edges of consciousness until the voices of the gods aren't quite so loud. As your eyes flutter closed, you think of the carving on the wall. The god with the falcon head. Horus, watching with silent judgment. Or is it protection? Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Just before sleep takes you, a soft hand places something beside your pillow. It's a tiny wooden figurine, carved by your eldest son. It's meant to be you, complete with a comically oversized crown and a very dramatic nose. You laugh quietly, the sound echoing like wind in the empty chamber. For a second, you don't feel like a god, just a tired man in a cold room, watched by stars that don't care who wears the crown. The morning sun slices through the reed blinds like a golden blade, and you're awake again, if you ever truly slept. That potion? Great for quieting the gods, less great for actual rest. Still, you rise, spine stiff, muscles creaking like the hull of a bark. Being a living deity comes with some seriously mortal aches. Your feet touch the floor, and immediately a servant rushes to slip sandals beneath them. Another starts fanning you, even though it's barely warm. You'd think after decades of this, it would feel normal. It doesn't. You're still not sure if you're the ruler of the land or just its most elaborately dressed houseplant. A message arrives almost immediately. It's from the necropolis overseer. Yes, again. The tomb artists are behind schedule. The cause? One of the senior carvers claims the design on your sarcophagus gave him nightmares. He says Anubis winked at him, twice. You send word back. Tell him the god winks at everyone eventually. You make your way, slowly, sandaled, and perfumed, to the temple courtyard, where rehearsals are underway for the Yopet festival. It's a massive public spectacle meant to reaffirm your divine power and the prosperity of the land. In theory, anyway. In practice, it's a logistical nightmare involving elephants, incense, and teenagers trying to walk like they're possessed by gods. A priest rushes up with a crisis. The sacred boat platforms missing two peacocks and a painted eyeball. You assure him the gods will forgive minor theatrical inaccuracies. You sit on your gilded throne, observing the scene as if it were a divine vision. But your mind drifts to legacy. Because let's be honest, you've got one foot in the afterlife already. Your tomb, remember, has been under construction since your coronation. Generations of workers have carved your story into limestone. Your victories, your offerings, your face repeated like a divine meme across an eternity of walls. Still, the end never feels quite ready. The corridors twist and wind, with traps for grave robbers and chambers for your golden treasures. A whole orchestra of eternal furniture, food, and fashion waits to travel with you. Even your pets. Yep, they've been mummified too. Remember that leopard you raised from a cub? Still looks great in linen. Here's a quirky bit. Some pharaohs commissioned fake tombs to throw off looters. Decoy chambers with false sarcophagi and misleading hieroglyphs. It's like an ancient version of hiding your Wi-Fi password under a decoy post-it. And yet, despite all this effort, you know deep down that time will eventually claim you. Historians still argue whether the obsession with tomb building came from genuine belief in the afterlife or just the fear of being forgotten. Either way, the stone doesn't lie, and neither do your knees. You stand, dismiss the rehearsal, and retreat to your private scriptorium. There, you review the royal annals, your deeds, your battles, your laws, each line carefully inscribed, every word chosen to make you seem a little more godlike than the last. You're tempted to edit a few things, maybe leave out the minor famine, emphasize that temple you built, add a poetic line about how you spoke directly to Ra. But you resist, mostly. Because now, more than ever, you understand the weight of memory. Outside, the wind begins to pick up. Sand swirls along the palace walls, whispering secrets from the desert. It's a reminder. The same breeze that carried the scent of lotus during your coronation will one day sweep clean your legacy. You step into the chamber of rituals for your evening solitude. The floor is cool beneath your feet, the stone smooth from centuries of footsteps, yours now among them. A scribe reads to you from the Book of the Dead, the passages intoned in that sleepy, rhythmical cadence. The words drift over you like a chant, reminding you of what's to come. And you shall pass the trials of fire and shadow, your heart weighed against the feather. A golden scale, a heart in one dish, a feather in the other. Anubis standing nearby, arms crossed, ears perked. No pressure. You smile wryly. As far as cosmic checkouts go, it's got drama. You rise and move toward a small altar, placing a carved figurine upon it. It's not a god. It's your father, the one who wore the crown before you. You remember watching him when you were a child, so grand, so sure, so unknowable. And yet, Here he is, inches tall, eyes painted wide, forever watching. You wonder how your children will remember you. Maybe as the one who ended the Southern Wars. Maybe as the king who fed the people during the year the Nile betrayed them. Or maybe just as the dad who let them paint murals on the palace ceiling one rainy day. Legacy is weird like that. The sky darkens and the first stars blink awake. You step out onto the high balcony, the desert stretching before you like an ancient sea. Somewhere out there, the tomb waits. Maybe finished, maybe not. You raise a hand toward the stars, not in command, just a greeting. They flicker like knowing eyes, watching your story, watching everyone's. And in this quiet moment, you no longer feel divine, or burdened, or tired. You just feel small. And oddly, that's a comfort. The breeze softens, curling gently through the open balcony, carrying with it the faintest scent of temple incense and warm desert dust. You stand still, eyes half-lidded, listening, not for voices or commands or the shuffle of advisors, but to the hush of the land you once ruled. It's quieter Shire now, slower and somehow deeper. Below, the Nile gleams like a ribbon of obsidian silk, winding through the night, as steady and eternal as breath. Somewhere far down its banks, a nightbird calls, low and lonely, a lullaby in feathered tones. Even the stars above seem to sigh a little, blinking sleepily in their ancient constellations, just as they did for pharaohs long gone, and just as they will for dreamers still to come. You lean back against the cool stone, its weight familiar, anchoring. You're not the God King anymore, not the boy cradled in gold, or the man crushed beneath the cobra crown. Not the living Horus, or the voice of Ra. Not tonight. Tonight, you're just breath in the silence. Bones inside a story, eyes gazing across a cradle of sand and memory. And it's okay, because whether they remember you for your glory, your grief, or your leopard skin slippers, you've walked the path. Every cracked mosaic, every whispered curse, every too heavy crown, it's all behind you now. You exhale once more, long and slow. The night takes it gently. And in this last flicker of wakefulness, you begin to drift, past pyramids and painted walls, past reed boats and moonlit dunes, into that stillness where even time forgets to march. Let go, float, sleep, end of script. Sweet dreams.